So at this time, I'll call this meeting to order at 6:32. Our first item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so next up, there's a couple things that I actually would like to change the order just a slight bit. And this might help with public comments or might not, I'm not sure, but I'm just guessing. So first up, I do have a correspondence from Julie Regimal, our superintendent, who cannot attend the meeting tonight regarding the governor's announcement. So I'll read her correspondence. As you know, the governor announced that he would not be extending the universal masking recommendations for schools. The current guidance for schools after students return from February break would allow schools with a student vaccination rate of 80% or more to remove masks. The state has not yet announced our vaccination rate, but we do not expect our schools to meet that requirement. I have heard from the Agency of Education that we can expect the mask recommendations to be removed shortly, perhaps in mid-March. That timeline would allow winter sports seasons to finish safely. All through the pandemic, the board has maintained safety and minimized risk by following the Vermont Department of Health and the Agency of Education recommendations and guidance. We hope to continue this practice. As superintendent, I have advocated strongly that the state not keep students wearing masks based upon a vaccination rate. It is either good public health policy to move forward without masks or not. Given that we have an expectation that the state will change its recommendation and remove masks for all students shortly, I would suggest that the board wait and see if the agency makes that change. If not done so by the first board meeting in March, I suggest that the board consider making a change to our masking policy at that time. So that's her correspondence. That being said, I also agree that this is a discussion that should happen in our next meeting, which would be March 8th. We can't put it on the agenda for this meeting just because we didn't have time to warn it to allow all parties to participate in the meeting. But unless somebody is opposed to it, I think it should be on the agenda for our next meeting for a discussion. Is anybody opposed to having it on the next agenda? Okay, so that will be on our March 8th agenda, which is our next meeting. There's a discussion about mask policies within our schools. Okay, at this time, I will open it up to public comments. We will do our standard 3 minutes. And just raise your hand and I'll call on you. Once I call on you, if you could just announce who you are, that would be perfect. Thank you. First up, I have Tammy. Is there anyone else? Seeing no one else, Tammy, you're up. Tammy, you're muted.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
I'm on Zoom all day long at work. You'd think I'd have this down pat, but anyway. I'm probably gonna run out of time like I usually do, so I'm just gonna hit some bullet points. What I really want to talk about tonight is Act 78, which was a cowardly procedure that was put in place by our governor, allowing people to give us even less access to open public meetings. This happened on January 18th, and he's calling it a temporary suspension, which is running for an entire year. I hardly call that temporary, especially since there's no state of emergency. And there are other organizations, other meetings, select boards, DRBs, all kinds of meetings that are still taking place either as hybrid or in person. So I don't understand why this school board can't meet in person. There's more to this than people think. When things are starting to actually look like they're going to loosen up, then all of a sudden you pull the reins back on school board meetings. That's not giving parents a very good taste in their mouth, because obviously there's another agenda behind this. I'm not going to spit back the open meeting law to you folks because you all know what it is. But Act 78 is a direct contradiction to it. It's taking away our voice.
Tammy, if I could interrupt you for a second. I don't know if you saw the agenda or not, but later on in our agenda, there is a discussion about having our meetings in person from now on. We're gonna, the census I've gotten from most board members is they'd like to go back to the hybrid, where we have an in-person session with the ability to log in remotely. We are going to discuss that later in the meeting. I don't know if you'd like to finish what you're saying. That's absolutely up to you, but we are discussing that.
No, I would love to, I would love to see everybody get back to in person. If people can go to the grocery store and go out to dinner and go to social events all unmasked, because almost everybody that's on this meeting right now has been seen in public with no mask. This is getting ridiculous. And people have a right to talk to the people that they put in those seats. And according to your own job description for a school board member, the school board reports to the community as their elected trustee. You guys have been avoiding us at all costs. There's no state of emergency. There's no grim reaper that's going to come out and kill everybody if they end up all in one room. People can get on planes, go on vacation, go out to dinner, go to public events, all unmasked, but you can't do your job that you were hired to do and sit in a room with all of us. I just have a real problem with that, because all it does is make people full of more distrust. Like, why are you avoiding us? You know, contrary to popular belief across the country, we are not domestic terrorists. Just because we're starting to see some of the things that are happening in the schools that aren't right doesn't make us a domestic terrorist. It makes us a concerned parent. And we have a right to have answers, and we have a right to have them in person, especially since Vermont is as rural as it is. These meetings don't work like this. What about the people that have really bad internet that craps out all the time, or some people that don't even have a computer? You're taking away their right to have access to you when they were the ones that voted to put you there to begin with. So I really do hope when you visit this later on that you consider coming back full-time in the same room, none of this remote crap. If somebody is extremely sick or if somebody's out of town, I get it. But as a practice, this should be done the way it's supposed to be done, the way it was when you were elected, in person. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments?
Yes.
Hello.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Gary, and I have my wife here, Pamela.
Hello.
Currently, we have grandchildren. We
In
don't have
school.
any children in school. I'm just concerned with the bill that Dick Sears is trying to pass at the House regarding if anybody has an argument about a mask, it's, you know, you're going to face a 2 to 3 year jail sentence. And it even sounds like it's even going to go further than that, just not about mask issues, but even if you have any issues with school board members, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just,
Like, we can't express ourselves
you know,
without
without a fear of being
suppressed or
right or
arrested or
Right.
whatever.
so what are, I just want to know what your thoughts are. That's all. I'm not trying to interject here. I just want to know what your thoughts are about this whole situation that Dick Sears is trying to introduce in the Senate or into the House. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll be honest with you, I hadn't heard about that bill. I can only speak from my personal experiences. I don't have a problem with people coming and voicing their opinion at meetings. Even if I don't agree with your opinion, I still want to hear what it is. I mean, that, as Tammy said, that's why we were put here, is to represent everyone. So I personally don't know anything about it. And honestly, I don't agree with it, but I don't know about anyone else. If anybody else wants to weigh in, I've just never heard of it. Don.
Okay. I would just want to thank you for your comment and your understanding.
And I'm the wife, Pam. I'm also really concerned about our kids wearing the mask continuously. We go around in stores and the adults are unmasked and our children are masked. I do not see any sense in that, since the last variant is so minute that kids would have no problem with it, hardly at all. Why are we doing that? Why are we making our kids wear masks? And they have been finding proof. I mean, we see each other's faces. My husband has a hard time hearing. He depends a lot on watching people's lips. When you're behind a mask, you can't even see their lips. The kids don't even know the faces of their friends or what other kids are saying or whatever. This is really wrong on all levels. And I am totally opposed to you guys mandating, or anybody mandating, that our kids should be wearing masks in school. I'm totally opposed to it. And I can't even imagine that we are punishing our children like this. They can't see facial expressions. They can't see happiness or sadness. They can't hear voices well. They're not even speaking well because they can't understand enunciation. Why are we doing this to our children? I can understand if it's to another adult, person to person. Why are we doing this to children? I do not understand that at all.
Thank you. Don, I saw your hand up.
Yes, Gary, give me that bill number again. I think I know which bill it is, but what is it? It's a House bill?
I believe, Don, I'd have to go back and get that for you. Let me, if you don't mind, I'll
You
go.
don't have to. It's my understanding that bill is going nowhere. You know, you can introduce, and I say this as a former legislator, you can introduce just about anything if it's not going to harm, seen as harming or threatening someone or obscene. So you know who I am, and you can give me a call, but I don't think you'll find, if you go and check the daily calendars, that bill is going anywhere.
Good.
Okay, Don. Thank you, Don. Yeah, I just saw it and
Very
I'm just,
concerned.
it just rubbed me the wrong way, if you will. It just made me nervous that we're going to be subject to our freedom of speech and you know, that bill
We're going to be
is,
suppressed about what we want to say.
yeah, that bill is very scary. Thank you, Don.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other public comments? Seeing none, that concludes our public comments. Next up is agenda review. I don't have any adjustments. Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll move on to our consent agenda, and we actually have 2 meeting minutes to approve. First up, I'd entertain a motion to approve our meeting minutes from January 20th. Steve's the first, Terry's the second. Any discussion?
I had one thing, Chris.
Sure.
on the third page, under new business, the spot where I was talking about the tax rate increases in terms of a percentage. The last part, it says that and under 1 cent decrease in Swanton, it should have been just under 1% decrease in Swanton.
Okay, we can adjust that. Anything else? Seeing none, all those in favor of accepting the January 20th meeting minutes as adjusted, raise your hand. Abstentions?
Chris, I don't find that I got the February minutes. Were minutes sent out early or whatever, but I went through today and I did not find the February.
We haven't got to the February one. We're still doing January 20th.
Yeah, no, I know that. I'm just saying that that passed. So the January, but the February I haven't seen.
Okay, Jen, I didn't see your vote.
Sorry, Chris, I had to check and see if that's the one that I missed, so it is the one.
So you're abstaining. Okay, so the motion carries 801 for January 20th. Okay, on to February 1st. Did everyone else receive the minutes? Terry?
They were in the drive, so I don't know if we got them via email or just looking in the shared drive for the minutes.
I found them in the drive myself.
I didn't get them, and I didn't look in the drive, so my bad.
So would we like to table this or accept them as?
Make a motion to accept them.
Okay, so we have a motion to accept them by Peter. Do I have a second? Devin's a second. Any discussion?
Don and Steve, I did just email you the link directly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no discussion, all those in favor of accepting the February 1st meeting minutes, raise your hand. Noes, raise your hand, and abstentions. So motion carries 701 with Steve and Don abstaining. Excuse me, 702. Okay, that concludes our meeting minutes. Now we're going to move on to presentations, and we have a presentation on truancy and student engagement from Celine.
Hello, so I'm the student engagement coordinator, and I'm not sure who's running the PowerPoint for me.
Laura,
I'm going
will share that.
I'm going to do that, Celine.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
You ready to share now?
I am.
Okay. And you see that?
I am good. Okay. So the focus of this presentation obviously is on the attendance and engagement piece within the district. You go ahead and hit the next slide. So this has a lot of information on it, but it's essentially the MTSS of attendance. And so the information from here was pulled from a couple of different sources. Attendance Works was one of them. And then the School Leader's Guide to Tackling Attendance Challenges is another book reference. And so the illustration at the top is more essentially just to illustrate what we're doing, the tier 1, 2, and 3. And a lot of the information on there is actually within the 3 boxes that are below it. So essentially the work around what I'm trying to do is tiered. And so in looking at the MTSS, you're looking at the universal supports at tier 1. So developing attendance teams and monitoring your data, working with families around the education on attendance, and then the whole school celebrations, whole school activities, and then things going on in the classroom. Tier 2 is more targeted. It's when you start talking about kids at EST that have been missing attendance, doing check-in and check-out, that targeted checking in with a trusted adult, social skills if that's what's needed, small group mentoring. And then if a kid at that point needs more targeted support, it moves up to tier 3 and it's the intensive support. So that can be a referral to me or the coordinated service plans, depending on the level of need at that point. So this is kind of the umbrella under which a lot of my work is. And this is something that I created at the beginning of the year to kind of send out as kind of the guide work for a lot of the work. What I do is more targeted towards the tier 3 in the day-to-day, but there's examples of that I will show you later in this presentation of the tier 2 and the tier 1, which is a lot of school-based stuff. If you want, you can go ahead. Yep. So I'm going to actually start going down the rubric and start at tier 3 specific to my role. So my caseload, I specifically work with students are referred to me based on need from the school. And so my caseload at this point from MVU for the high school students, I've had 22 referrals. I'm currently active with 12. I have 2 that are kind of in the initial states of engagement. And then 8 that I'm no longer working with. They've either moved, they've transitioned to VAL, or they're unenrolled. In the middle school, I have 6 families that I'm working with. 1 is in the initial stages of engagement. In Swanton, there's been 9 students that have been referred. 5 are currently active. 1 is in the initial stages, and 3 families have moved prior to engagement. And then for Highgate, I've had 3 referrals. 2 of them were paused because at the point that they were referred, attendance seemed to improve. And then with 1 family in particular, I was unable to make contact, as was the school. So that's kind of at a standstill. So the intervention strategies vary in terms of what that looks like when I'm working with specific families. Initially, it's a lot of communication with the guidance counselor to kind of better understand the family and the student. And then kind of the best step forward for me really is kind of collaborating with the guidance counselor and connecting with the family. And then it's a reach out and meeting with families to identify any kind of barriers to school, kind of what's going on in the home, because it's not the same for every family, what the challenge is to get the child to school. A big part of my job too is coordinating with agency partners that are already established with the family, if there are any, and if they're not and there's a need, working to connect that family with community resources if it would be beneficial. I monitor the attendance and regularly connect with the families that I'm working with. That can be over the phone or in person. My schedule is not dictated by the school day. So if a family is working throughout the day and they need to meet in the evenings and they prefer that, then that's something that I'm able to do. If the family prefers phone or virtual, that's fine too. It's kind of meeting the families where they're at as I work with them, and then work to identify some strategies to increase attendance. Looking at the tier 2 piece and the targeted groups, this year we have started doing a bridge to middle school lunch bunch. The focus of this was targeting students who would be coming up to MVU from the elementary schools next year, specifically looking at kiddos that have any kind of anxiety or have any concerns around attendance, with the caveat that often when students transition to a middle school, that can lead to an increase of absenteeism. So thinking proactively, what can we do to kind of create relationships with these students in advance of them having that transition? So once a month, Dan Palmer, the principal up here, And the middle school guidance counselors, we and myself, we end up going to the middle schools and do lunch once a month. So the first Tuesday of the month is Highgate, and then Franklin, and then Swanton is the third Tuesday of the month, where we get to meet with those kiddos and try to build some relationships. This one, Jeff Benet ended up getting James Bruchak here to present, to work with field studies, and then he ended up going through and doing some presentations throughout our schools and at central office. In working with James, there was collaboration around connecting him. So James is an author, he is a wilderness expert, tracking, hunting, fishing, and all of those things. So he came in and worked with our field studies program, and then through him, he's going to mentor 3 of the students in the field studies program. He's not local, so it's going to be a virtual thing where he connects with the students a couple of times a month, and the hope is that it will re-engage some of those students that are struggling around attendance, and that this is hopefully something that we can kind of build on. But as a starting spot, we're starting with 3 kiddos. And then looking specifically at the tier 1, which is when you're talking about the data collection and kind of the universal supports across the board for all of the students. So it's the bottom tier of the MTSS. And so an important thing is just to kind of talk about definitions. So regular attendance is defined as missing 5% or less of school for any reason. It doesn't really matter what the reason behind it is, whether it's excused, unexcused. And that regular attendance is, at that point, you can assume that there's not going to be a negative impact to a student academically because they've missed school. And so really the goal is that every student is regularly present, and that really on average, a student should not be missing more than 1 day per month. At the point where you get past the regular attendance, you start looking at the at-risk category. That's 5 to 10%. And that's where a student's kind of on the tier where it, attendance could be a negative, that absenteeism could negatively impact a student. It might not, they're kind of on the fence, but you're leaning more towards that, probably playing an impact in the student's academics. Chronic, you're looking at 10 to 20%, and it's strongly associated with negative outcomes, such as course failure and dropout. And then kids that are severely chronic, you're looking at a lot more negative impact and predictable school failure. So those are the categories within which the regular attendance, the at-risk, the chronic, and the severely chronic are really the lenses that we're starting to use to look at attendance across the board within the schools, so we can kind of hone in on to what category students are in, and kind of build from there. So communication to families around absences. So part of the communication that's gone out is to identify the goal to family of students missing less than 9 school days within the year. Obviously, while keeping in mind that we're in the middle of a pandemic, which makes it a challenge to kind of keep that in mind. And also part of the communication that's gone out to families was around absences and the shift to what's considered an excused absence. There was, at each school, there was kind of a different policy around if a parent called in, it would automatically be excused versus based on the reason. And so as a district, communication was sent out earlier this year to kind of clarify that in terms of excuses, in terms of absences, what's considered excused are the following reasons. So if there's an illness, if there's an appointment that can't be scheduled outside of the school day, if there's a holiday that's not observed within the typical school calendar, emergency family situations such as a death in the family, planned absences that are pre-approved was kind of the big thing, and kind of trying to shift that with families that if you're going to be away for a week or two, that there's knowledge and there's steps taken in advance to prepare for that, and absences due to suspension or expulsion. So this is an example of data that we're keeping to kind of create a baseline of information and absences moving forward. So this is for Highgate, and it's a monthly snapshot. So it's not cumulative across the months, but it's looking at each month in isolation to kind of figure out where students are. So in order to read this, because I know there's a lot of moving pieces to this. The solid lines are the information. So it's the totals with COVID numbers in there. So if you're looking at any of the solid lines, it includes all attendance, all the total numbers of all absences for each kid. Knowing that COVID has significantly impacted the total numbers of absences for our kids, I also wanted to run a chart that took out the COVID data and the COVID absences to show what the absences would be without those COVID days in there. So the lines that are dashed with circles, that information reflects the attendance totals without COVID data in there. And as you can see, and it's pretty consistent across all the charts, that those lines are more solid and more, and are lower than, and don't spike as much as with the COVID data lines. The graphs on each side, so the charts on each side are identical. The only thing that's different is that when I take out the regular attendance totals that I wanted to have in there just to show where kids are at for totals there too, it's so that you can kind of zoom in and see, it's just easier to see the numbers and where things fall when it's more concentrated on just the at-risk chronic and severely chronic. So within this, I've done this for each school. So another thing I just want to touch on too. So when we started out this school year, in terms of taking attendance and coding it, we did not have Power School set up to be able to track COVID-related absences. And at the time, we're under the impression that we couldn't necessarily highlight it as such in Power School. So it wasn't until November that that was implemented in Power School to be able to pull out absences. Some schools have been able to go back and put in the prior absences that were COVID-related and others haven't. So when you're looking at SWAT, and the reason why there's not data for August, September, and October is just because the code didn't exist at that point. And it's just been manpower to kind of go back and figure that out. And so this one is for Franklin.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Please? I wonder, I'm kind of confused on, I think this, I really want to understand it. I think it's great data. All that you're telling us is great to hear. I mean, not great news, but good to know that we're doing something about it. But why, let's take Franklin right here. Why is the number without COVID higher than the number with? I don't understand that.
The number without COVID in terms of regular attendance?
Oh, okay. So we're looking at attendance. No.
Yeah.
See, yeah, I don't quite get the dotted line versus the green one.
Yeah.
Can you explain those again?
Yes, I absolutely can. So
Thank
the
you.
solid line includes the total number of present and absences across the board. So if a child is out for COVID, that's in there, and the absences are in there. The dotted lines, what I've done is I've not included those absences within the dotted lines. So as you can see, when COVID is not a factor in the dotted lines, you're at risk, you're chronic, and you're severely chronic, those numbers go down and attendance would go up. So that's kind of what you're seeing, like at the point where you're not counting those absences anymore.
Gary, you're muted.
And maybe, and let me.
I thought we were looking at absences rather than attendance. And
No,
that's
so
why.
no, and it's essentially what we're looking at too is these are students in attendance categories. So
Thank you.
as we're looking at it, it's essentially what we're saying is, so like a child could be severely chronic because they've had absences to such an extent that that puts them in that category. But let's say they have 10 absences as of in October and they're all COVID related. At the point that the COVID related is no longer a factor, if it wasn't a COVID related absence, that child would no longer be in the chronic category. So it's really just essentially the point of the chart is to show the difference between that if COVID wasn't happening, how that would impact and change the attendance totals because of students being told they can't come to school because they have COVID. if that, I don't know if that makes more sense. And I'd be happy to follow up if there's any further questions or to kind of talk this out too. So this is definitely an ongoing conversation, and just one of the ways that we're tracking data is just to compare the difference between when we're looking at the COVID numbers and we take those out, what's the difference between where attendance would be, just to kind of get an idea for how much the COVID totals are impacting student attendance to make them fall into different categories. And so at this point, just some of the things that I want to talk on, like the global picture in terms of the factors that are impacting attendance that I'm coming across, whether I'm looking at the school-wide data or I'm, speaking to the work that I'm doing individually with families. Some of the biggest stuff that's impacting student attendance is really the student mental health. Students who had any kind of social adversity or just felt like they struggled socially, or had any kind of anxiety going into the pandemic, it just seems to have made that, just kind of foster that in isolation, and then finding a way to come back and adjusting to routines back. Particularly a lot, so I'm part of, there's a countywide meeting that happens once a month, where all the people kind of dealing with and working in the attendance realm come together. And a lot of people are also noticing too, particularly the 9th and 10th graders seem to really be struggling. And they were also the kiddos that were in middle school when the pandemic hit. So they kind of went from that middle school atmosphere to being in high school. And there's just been a lot of struggle and a lot of, I think a lot of it was, just kind of skills you build middle school moving up to high school that was harder for them because it was just a different environment. And so kind of those two pieces in terms of the mental health seem to be showing through. Parent perceptions of COVID is definitely impacting attendance. As numbers increase, kids are more often called out and stay home just because of nervousness around it. And then there's also sometimes too, parents will say that, I keep getting notifications from the school that there's cases in the school. And so I'm keeping my child home. Something else too, reestablishing healthy expectations in the home. When the pandemic started, kids were at home, parents were at home, parents needed kids to be kind of occupied. And so it led to a lot of instances where kids were more on technology more, and just kind of those boundaries went out the window to kind of make it all work because we were all trying to make it work in the moment. And so there's times where and some of the families I'm working with, it's just a struggle to kind of reestablish those healthy boundaries in the home, especially around technology, so that we're not up too late into the night or not just refusing to come and stay at home. And often the mental health piece plays a factor in that as well. And then also just the readjusting to the school routine, especially for the olders, around the idea that, 5 days a week, and kind of readjusting and coming back, and kind of setting up the school routine. So taking all of this in mind, there is a committee that we actually just met for the first time today, that we've gone through the steps and started really with the goal of looking at the data, looking at kind of where things are at, and working on some universal supports. So we'll meet weekly. And a big part of what we want to do is include student voice too, because we can have all the best ideas in the world. But, when it comes to working with the youth, we kind of want their perspective and their thoughts. So I've talked to Alyssa Urban, who's doing some of the, I forgot the name of it, the portrait of a graduate. And so she's going to get student voice around that. And I think I'm going to jump in with her. And so the idea was that we're going to have all the social studies classes come through and talk about what do you need to be a graduate, but also leading into that, like what engages you in school, what makes you want to come to school, and kind of get voices to build on that. And that this is just a starting point too. The hope is to kind of build and push in. There's a lot of often teams within the elementary schools, and I know I've reached out around like the PBIS teams, that how do we kind of do across the board, work around attendance and universal supports, and kind of work together towards that goal, starting up here at the middle and high, and then kind of working my way down so that we can create some universal supports in that way. And that is it for me.
Thank you very much. Is there any questions or comments? Terry first. That's all I
I
see.
would like to ask you, Celine, it's obviously you're passionate about this. It's obvious. I just wonder, what is it about it that got you involved in it? I mean, I'm just curious.
Yeah, so I was a teacher. I taught a bit in Florida, and I had kids that were kind of falling through the cracks. And in Florida, it's a school issue if a kid's not coming, not a DCF issue. And so I really left the classroom with the idea that I wanted to find a way to work to catch these kids and kind of be the net for them. And then I ended up coming back to Vermont, originally from Vermont, went to Florida, came back as the truancy specialist at NCSS, and then did that, but wanted to get back into education. So homeschool coordinator, and then this opened up, and it was just, this is my wheelhouse. So yeah, no, this is my passion. Is how do we kind of get those kids that are not engaged back in?
Devin.
Yeah, thanks for all the information, Celine. It just caught my attention that virtually every school on there, there were about 50% of kids in that regular, no risk category, which means 50% of our kids are in some level of elevated risk. And we keep talking about the recovery plans and our proficiency goals. And I think this really kind of sets the stage for it. It's going to be really, really important. All the work you're doing, Celine, is going to be really, really important because we're going to have a hard time getting anywhere with proficiencies if we've got that high of a rate of absenteeism. So I know I'm going to be interested to see those numbers on a fairly regular basis. I'll just throw that out there now. I know Julie's not in this one, but it'll get back to her. So thank you, Celine. I really appreciate the presentation.
I mean, it's important to have a baseline, and I guess that's kind of the focus I went into it with. It's that if we don't have a baseline of where things are at, then it's hard to kind of know how to shift anything, any one which way. And if you're implementing a bunch of stuff, but you don't have that baseline, it's hard to know if it's improving or not. And that's one way to look at the data too. So there's a bunch of different ways. So if it's more helpful to kind of figure out what specifically in terms of what window or lens we want to look at it too. I'm totally open to having that dialogue to figure out what makes most sense and how do we kind of make it so that we can see across time.
Okay, I got a couple of hands raised. So first is Toby, second is Don.
Hi, Celine. There wasn't, you didn't have a lot of comparisons to like other schools in that presentation. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I thought the presentation was great. I learned a lot from it. But if you are, like Devin said, if we're seeing numbers regularly, I kind of, I'm always interested in how our district compares to particularly some neighboring districts. So I know it's more work, but that would be helpful in the future for me. I'd like to see, and this by no means I thought your presentation was great. It's just my own personal thing. I really like to see how we're comparing to. So thank you.
Yes, and that's something that came up today in the meeting that we had with the committee that I'm going to reach out to Julie to see around. I don't think, so we have the countywide meetings and nobody's brought up, I'm the one that talks about data. I don't think people have data or doing data like I'm doing data to the extent that I am to kind of chart it and graph it. I think a lot of people are more just in it trying to solve it. So I don't know how much data there is out there for other schools, but that doesn't mean I can't ask the question, because I do think it would be helpful to kind of be able to see across, I mean, and even just comparing similar districts, non-similar districts, because then if somebody's doing something different, or, you know, I think collaboration across the board, it would be helpful.
Absolutely. Don.
Yep. Thank you. I'm quite pleased to hear what's happening. I hope it really makes a big step forward. My question is there still a group in Franklin County that meets regularly on this issue of attendance and at risk? because Jeff Bonet 30 years ago came by my office and said, we want to do this in the county. I guess maybe
Yes.
32 or 33 years ago.
Yep.
And I don't know, are they still meeting, or are you working out there only and without
Nope.
any interaction with other?
It used to be called TIP. It shifted this past year, going into this year. It used to be an impaneled team that people would bring student referrals to around attendance to work with CSS's truancy specialist. That position hasn't been filled for a while, and kind of the need shifted. And so now it's Franklin County School Attendance Support Network is the name. And it is essentially for people from all across the district come together. I happen to be the lucky one to facilitate that. And so everybody kind of comes together, and it's become more of a sounding board of what are people seeing, what are people dealing with, and then trying to support each other in that work. So yes, we are still all meeting, and it's just kind of an open platform now.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Oh, Joyce.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, and thank you, Celine, that I think a really important piece of what Celine just presented is the impact that COVID has had. And I guess I have to really see the positive part of this in terms of, like, when I look at Franklin's data, because I didn't know Celine was going to do a presentation last night, and Sue and I worked a ton on attendance things last week. And just like, it made it really like a stark reality to me when I looked at some of our data, that when I include all absences, I have 43 kids in K-6, 43 with 5 to 10 absences. When I take out COVID, I have 12. When I look at 11 to 15 absences with all attendance, all absences, I have 16. When I take out COVID, I have 1. 16 to 20 absences with all absences, I have 7. Take out COVID, I have 1. So I just have to be really hopeful that as COVID is on the decline, that our attendance, like in Franklin, I don't feel we ever had attendance issues until COVID. I mean, you know, once in a while you have a couple of kids, but I just really have to hope that with kids not having to stay home 5 days, and before it was 10 days. And, you know, even those kids that have 5 to 10, it wasn't a day here, a day there. It was 5 continuous days in some of those cases. And that's really different in terms of what they're missing of instruction. So just kind of going to back to what Devin was saying before, you know, this is really, you know, we're obviously really thoughtfully planning around this, but I am really hoping hopefully see the back of COVID very soon, that attendance is going to get better. And anyway, that I just think it's a really huge difference that COVID makes to our attendance. And I thought some of Celine's graphs really show that. So thanks again, Celine.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions or comments regarding truancy? Seeing none, that concludes our presentation. Thank you very much, Celine.
Thank
Very
you.
informative.
Have a good night, y'all.
You as well. Now we will move on to our elementary principal presentations, and we'll start with Highgate and Yeshua.
Excellent. Excuse me. Thank you, Chris. So just some of the things I wanted to highlight. I don't know if all of you are on Facebook or follow our Facebook page, but we did have a post since last time with a picture of Hawthorne, because he comes and visits our all school assemblies on Fridays. And he was sitting with a kindergarten student who was very excited to see Hawthorne. And the student that was, spoiler alert, dressed as Hawthorne, sat down on the floor with the student. And it was actually just this amazing moment of just sitting with him, and made some office ladies cry. And, you know, just this wonderful moment of one of our oldest kids sitting, you know, as Hawthorne with our youngest kids. And so I thought that was just awesome. It was on Facebook, and it wasn't public, but the student that was dressed as Hawthorne actually commented that it was me, and just had a little thing in there. So that was just a really nice moment on Facebook. So I want to start out with that. in talking about Mr. Bruchak, who came and got into all of our schools. It really was wonderful. Our 4th grade in our curriculum, they have a Vermont unit in social studies. And so our teachers had that, and then him coming was just wonderful, because not just is he Abenaki, but he, you know, is a naturalist and he tracks, and he was just really engaging for kids, and he did a really nice job with that. So I appreciate Jeff Benet organizing that for all of our schools. I think all of us feel the same, but it was a really great experience to have him come in. We are in the midst of Spirit Week, which is always very exciting before break. You know, we can dress up as all of our fun little things, but I wanted to say our 3rd grade team is quite impressive. If you ever get a chance at some point to come to Spirit Week and see Miss Lewis or Miss LeBounty, you will not be dissatisfied by seeing what they do. We also continue, we have monthly events for Cliff Year of the Book, which, to remind you, is when we get that $25,000 to get books, events and books in hands with kids. And this month was Fall in Love with Reading. And so kids gave book reviews and why they loved the books. And we had them all posted on one wall in the main lobby, which was wonderful and organized by our librarian. We did, unfortunately, it seems like weather hits us for our data days. And the last 2 February data days, we've actually had no school. And we really valued the data we were going to look at. And so we have found a staff meeting and some PLCs. We're going to still dive into our data, because the coaches, myself and Mr. Becker, had all the data awaiting teachers, and then the day got canceled. So we still wanted to make sure we were looking that all over, because it is going to inform our instruction. We also had Leah Marmelstein, as I've talked about before, but she came by and I was lucky to spend a few hours with her, and the work she's doing really is incredible. And one thing she started off with was a group of 15 kindergartners who were very excited to have her in there. And she opened up with explaining why all the adults were watching, and was explained to the kids that they're watching because they want to become better teachers. And it was just interesting to have the kids kind of understand that this specialist is coming in to help us be better for them. So that I thought was really great. And then kind of my last thing, I know, Chris, that this is your last board meeting. And I just wanted to say thank you very much for all you've done in the past couple of years. I know you've been extremely supportive and helpful through a kind of a challenging time for the last 2 years. So I did just want to say thanks for all you do, and hopefully I will see you around Highgate. That's all I got.
Thank you, Joshua. I appreciate that. Any questions for Gate? I'm gonna have to shut my video off because my internet is struggling. I don't know if anybody raised their hand because everybody's frozen on my screen at the moment. So if you have a question, just give a shout, I guess, at the moment. If not, we will move on to Chris and Justina and Swan.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. So just a few things that were not in my report. Like you heard Yeshua talk about, we also hosted Jim Bruchak for some storytelling and some music the other day, and our 6th grade students participated in that. So that was a really nice thing for that grade level team to be able to get together and work on. And following that presentation, those teachers really worked on the concept of storytelling and the importance of hearing the stories of our elders and passing those stories in a traditional way down, and thinking about how that really honors our Abenaki population, but also anyone can listen to the stories of their elders, their grandparents, for example, and retell and pass on those stories. So that was a really exciting experience for our students. We're getting geared up to send 2 teams to the Vermont Junior Iron Chef competition on March 12th. So they're working on their last couple of practice rounds. They have the most incredible personalized aprons and chef hats, and this is all being done through our Crossroads program. So we're really excited to gear up and pack up our cooking equipment and head to the Champlain Valley Expo on March 12th to see that competition. As we also heard earlier, there is a series of videos that Yeshua and Joel Van Lent and I worked on recently that Yeshua and I have both shared out for our school communities that talk about resilience for both parents and students in the wake of the pandemic. And that really took the format of questions that we elicited from parents, and we kind of grouped those by theme. And then Yeshua and I asked those questions of Joelle in a video format, and we were able to then post those for families to take a look at. And I've got some really good feedback on that. So that's a great resource. And I like that video format because we can post that and it doesn't go away. So it can be a resource that's kind of at the fingertips of our families. So that's been a positive from the past few days. We are also in the midst of Spirit Week, like Yeshua mentioned. And if you did not have an opportunity, you can check out Facebook and see my brand new swan hat that was popular with some and not so popular with others. But we've had a really fun time this week with Mismatch Day and Crazy Hair and Hat Day. And tomorrow is, we will sum it up with tie-dye versus camo competition day. And it's just a really fun opportunity for us to do something on the lighter side and take our mind perhaps off some of the health stuff that we've had to deal with in the recent weeks. We are gearing up for a really busy hiring season at Swanton. We have a number of positions that are posted for next year. We have our library position that's currently posted. We have 2 intensive needs special education positions posted. We have 4 academic intervention positions, a PE teacher and a classroom teacher. And we've probably just begun to scratch the surface of some of the changes that will be happening at Swanton staffing wise this year. So that will definitely play a significant role in how Justina and I spend our time in the coming weeks and months. February, as a lot of you probably already know, is Black History Month. And one of the goals that I set for myself this year was to do some teaching in every classroom. I think it's good for students to see me in that role. And so this week I was able to finish up a series of lessons on Black History Month in all of our 3rd through 6th grade classrooms. Earlier in the year, I did lessons about bus safety in all of our kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade classrooms. So that was a goal of mine this year, to teach a lesson in every classroom in our building. And I was able to finish that up this week. So I'm feeling really good about accomplishing that. I want to give a quick shout out to our PTO who did their annual Carnation fundraiser at the beginning of the week, which is super fun. And I probably would not typically talk about fundraisers at the board meeting, but one of the things that I really appreciate about our PTO is that they really make a point of making sure that all students are included in that fundraiser. And they really are very aware that every student receives a carnation on Valentine's Day. And I just appreciate their sense of equity when it comes to that kind of work and making sure nobody gets left out. We started today, Justina and our instructional coaches and I, to map out our professional development plan for next year. I know it's only mid to February, but there's already a lot of thinking going on about what's happening next year. So we're excited about that. And I'll put more in that report, my report to the board next month, but we're already thinking about some exciting social, emotional, and academic professional development for next year. And the last thing that I wanted to mention is that we were fortunate today to distribute more antigen tests for any staff member or family who wanted those to have over the break. Kudos to our nurses, again, for managing those kinds of things. They've done a great job with that. And we were fortunate to be able to source those antigen tests for anyone who wanted them over the break, and hopefully potentially make sure that we're having a safe return when we come back in March. So we were really pleased about that. And that's it for me, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chris. Any questions for Swanton? Seeing none, we'll move on to Franklin and Joyce.
Thank you. So I want to start with that we were so honored that the Franklin Select Board decided to dedicate a page in the town annual report to Franklin School to thank us. And I had a teacher many years who every time I thanked her or gave her a compliment, she always said, it starts at the top. So I want to share their thank you to us with you as you're the top. So big thank you. And it says, it is with great pleasure that the Franklin Select Board would like to dedicate this page to the Franklin Central School staff during this difficult pandemic time. Schools are integral parts of small towns like Franklin and set the tone for the rest of the community. Franklin Central exudes dedication, integrity, and professionalism to the students and the community. The heartbeat of a school comes from its staff, and we have been blessed to witness day in and day out so many acts of kindness and compassion toward our children and families. Thank you to the many individuals that have cared for our youth under the hardest of circumstances. Our community is better because of you. So I always say this is a team effort with students and parents and staff and board and community, but it was certainly really, really special to be appreciated and recognized in that way. And actually, I stopped by at the select board meeting last night to thank them for their thank you. So it really, really made everybody feel really good. And many people posted it and anyway, but that thank you obviously is to all of you too. So in terms of the rest of my report, we continue to work with our math consultant, Christian Quartermain, around this last time. He worked on open-ended math problem solving and discussing strategies to support specific students around math fluency. We completed the National Education Assessment of Educational Progress with our fourth graders. We celebrated the 100th day of the number 100 on the 100th day of school. Lots of counting, lots of other fun activities. I did put in about our new kitchen equipment. I'm no longer calling it a parfait machine. I'm calling it a yogurt dispenser. So, and it's just been a big hit in the cafeteria. And we also got the new milk cooler, and I wrote some details about that, but staff and kids are all enjoying the new equipment. As Yeshua said, with the snow day cancellation of our half day in service, it's really hard coming up with basically 3 hours to do the work that we were going to do that day. So we are using PLCs, and it's not like we didn't already have agendas for the PLCs, but you know, we're trying to use more time there, some other time after school, during the day, looking at all of that data that we were going to review, which included Fountas and Pinnell subtest, high frequency words, Fountas and Pinnell text level benchmarks, all kinds of phonemic awareness assessments, also K to 3 to 6, DSA was a spelling assessment, F&P again, benchmark assessment, and really important because now we're looking at it K to 2 and 3 to 6, but I always think it's incredibly important to share that out K to 6 because all of that information is important to everybody and how we move forward and instruction in each of those grades and classes. And then also doing our SMART goal planning for the rest of the year based on that data. And as Yeshua said, Highgate and Franklin's work continued with Leah Mermelstein. This time her focus with us was on small group work. So looking at writing samples and alongside the unit plans to determine targeting needs of different groups and forming those small groups and really talking about how to do those small groups. We were excited to start hearing more about our incoming kindergarten students, although it's only January. We already met once with Jen Dewing and really getting those activities started. There'll be lots more activities between now and next fall to make that as smooth a transition as possible for parents and kids. And I did link that document with our transition timeline. We had a great time with the Super Bowl. We didn't have like a halftime show, but we had a great time with the Franklin Super Bowl, our Super Bowl 5 with our staff versus 6th grade. And we also had fun with the real Super Bowl with each of our grades representing one of the pro teams. And I was really happy that the staff fared better this year. Oh, and we had a Super Bowl watch party in each of the grades, watching the staff versus the 6th grade. And on a personal note, I was incredibly excited that I can now throw the football and not have it bounce out of the end zone. So I actually scored some points this year. So I was super excited. But we just had a great time with the kids, and everybody was a good sport. And again, some of the cool things we've had happen in the last couple of days, I'm actually just going to save for my next report, because we also were really excited about Jim Bruchak. And we've got some other things that have happened the last couple of days that I'll just wait and talk about in March. And I do want to say that I was thinking Chris had one more meeting after tonight, so I wasn't ready to say thank you, because I'll probably cry. So, but thank you, everybody. And again, I just thought that was so nice of the Franklin Select Board. So those of you that, I think it'd be great to say a little thank you to them too. And our former Select Board member, Peter, who now they have to do without on their Select Board because he's with us. But thanks.
Thank you, Joyce. Any questions for Franklin? Seeing none, that concludes our elementary presentations. Thank you, everyone. And we will move on to new business. And first up under new business is the ratification of Mbsd professional collective bargaining agreement. And I just received a text from Brandy Masco, who is the lead negotiator, and they voted to pass. So we can have a motion to accept the ratification of the Mvsd professional collective bargaining agreement. Terry's the first. Joanne's the second. Any discussion? First up is Peter.
Yeah, I'd just like to hear from any of the ones on that committee, just like highlights, maybe what we're happy about with this contract.
Honestly, I feel like both sides are happy with everything. Maybe not as ecstatic as we were, but the big thing is one of our goals is teacher retention. And so we tried to put together a better package to retain teachers and maybe even recruit new teachers. We put some money on the, quite a bit of money on the base, and plus we also did some stuff with making the entire package more appealing, like offering life insurance and disability insurance. One thing we got in return that we were looking for is some more staff meetings. We reworded it so it's not just staff meetings, but we had it as 2 before. Now it's 4 per month. That way there's more time to work on everything that needs to be done, PLCs and so many other things I can't even think of at the moment. Trying to think. Terry and Joanne, feel free to jump in. I'm sure I'm missing quite a bit.
I think you did a great job. I think you're right. We were really looking for the goal of retention and outcomes, and they go together. But also, I forget what we called it, because it was our intention. It wasn't staff meetings we were talking about. It was more problem solving, discussions, collaboration, teachers being able to get together, at least once a week. So, yeah.
Another part of it, I will say the negotiations went really, really well. It was very mutual and collaborative experience on both sides. There's a lot of good discussion. I think there was a lot of understanding in both directions. There was a couple issues that we were able to work through that didn't make it to the master agreement, but we were able to address and to try to make better, to improve our working environment for our teachers. Is there any other, or did that answer your question, Peter?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Chris. Thanks.
Chris, would you mind if I just added that, Brandy Maskell is a teacher at Highgate, and she was very impressed with the process as well. I think one thing she said to us, or to me, apparently there's two of me, that she really felt like they were very heard, is the thing she kept saying to me. So I just think in general, you all did a really nice job. And I think what I really appreciate is that we've said retention is something that we need to focus on. And I feel like that was a board goal, and you're working towards meeting that goal by what you offered in the master agreement. So I definitely appreciate that. I think it's incredible work. So thank you for doing that. And someone who used to do it, I know it's very time consuming. So I appreciate the time.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments before we vote? Seeing none, all those in favor of accepting the Mvsd Professional Collaborative Bargaining Agreement, raise your hand. Abstentions? Motion carries 8-0-1 with Devin abstaining. Okay, thank you. And moving on, let's see. Still under new business, I'll tip it over to Bonnie for the acceptance of some resignations.
Thank you, Chris. So the last meeting, I think you've all seen that Mr. Hartman has submitted his letter of retirement for the end of the school year. So that is in the board folder for this meeting as well. You may also not have yet seen the letter from Linda Rouse Turner, who has resigned from her role as the special education coordinator at MVU for this year, wishing to stay on with us as a special educator, but just stepping out of that administrator role. So both of those letters are in the board folder. So we would just ask that you accept those this time.
Do you need a motion for each one, or can we lump them together?
Maybe better to do a motion for each one, since Jay is a retirement and Linda is a resignation.
Absolutely. So at this time, I'd entertain a motion to accept Jay Hartman's letter of resignation. Don's a first. Devin's a second. Any discussion? Go ahead, Don.
Let me ask Devin. Devin, were you a student of Mr. Hartman's?
I was, yes.
I think you should make the motion then. All I was a professional colleague.
All right, I'm willing to do that.
I'll
Was
second
anyone
it
else?
as a long-time
Was anyone
colleague. I
else
didn't
on?
hang on. I didn't make it as long as Jay did, but I'm a little older than he is. But Jay, you've done well, and you deserve some time to enjoy life.
There's
How
actually,
many
I
others-
think there's a fair amount of Jay's students on this board. I was one of his students. I think Joanne was, and Peter was too. So, and
Wow,
Toby.
he has been there for quite a while.
Exactly.
What do you mean by that, Don?
When you look at some of these people there, they must be pushing up retirement age themselves, and he had them as students.
I
Actually,
think did he have anyone
of them, he
anyone
might have
for his
wanted to be taken
parents?
earlier.
Okay, so we readjusted a little bit. Devin's now the first, and Don is the second. So we just switched those. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of accepting Mr. Hartman's letter of resignation, signify by raising your hand. Motion carries 9-0. Thank you, Mr. Hartman, for your many years of service, and I hope you enjoy retirement.
I
Thank you,
think that-
Chris.
I think that
I'll
says
just
he's
simply
retired.
say, I'll just
He's
simply
going
say
on-
briefly.
Just a second,
I'm
Don.
sorry.
Go ahead, Jay.
I'll just simply say briefly, thank you to each and every one of you on the board, and to you, Chris, as the chair. Obviously, wish you the very best going forward. You know, it's been an honor and a privilege, and I am truly blessed and very thankful to have been able to spend 2/3 of my entire life as part of the Missisquoi Valley School District. And I thank each and every one of you for the part that you've played in making it the very pleasant ride that it's been. So thank you all.
Thank you as well, Jay. Don? You're muted, Don.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to add that even though he's retiring as a principal, I don't expect he's going to go away. So don't push that retirement thing too far.
My
Absolutely.
understanding is that he wants to join the sub list in Swanton.
Oh, no way. He lives in Franklin. He's volunteering in Franklin. No way.
You're very popular, Mr. Hartman. Okay, next up, I would accept the letter of resignation for Linda Rouse Turner. Motion for that, excuse me. Terry's the first. Toby's the second. Any discussion?
Chris, I got a question.
Go ahead, Peter.
Is this a resignation or just resigning from a position and staying in another position?
She's resigning from her current position and accepting another position within our district.
Okay.
Because her current position is an administrative position, and I believe she's going into a professional special educator role. Was I correct on that, Bonnie?
Yeah, so Linda was a special educator at MVU for many years, and she took the administrator role. And now she's wishing to step back from that and go back into a special educator role till she decides to retire. That's what she says.
Has the administrative role, so are we advertising for that, or is that on hold right now, or?
That is our next item on the agenda.
Oh, gotcha. All right.
Okay, any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of accepting Linda Rouse Turner's letter of resignation, raise your hand. Motion carries 9-0. Okay, as Bonnie said, next up is the Assistant Director of Student Services hire.
So we have advertised it, and we have, our committee has conducted interviews. And our candidate is Sarah Gates, who has been a teacher at MVU. She was a special educator, and then she's been our literacy coach at MVU, totaling about 16 years of experience. And we had a few very qualified candidates. However, Sarah definitely pulls ahead in her knowledge and experience with MVU, as well as her vast knowledge of special ed. So we would like the board's approval of Sarah as our candidate, and also along with that, so it would be two separate motions, but Sarah has written a letter of a leave of absence for 1 year from her teaching position. Oftentimes with a new administrator, they like to take a year leave of absence from their professional role. So if either party feels that it's not working out best as an administrator, then they're able to go back into their teaching role after that leave of absence. So I would ask the board to approve Sarah's 1 year leave of absence and support her in the candidacy for this position.
Okay, so we'll do two motions and we'll start first with the approval of leave of absence for Sarah Gates. I would accept that motion. Don's the first. Terry's a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving Sarah Gates' leave of absence, raise your hand. Motion carries 9-0. Okay, next up is the approval of the candidate, Sarah Gates, for the Assistant Director of Student Services.
Chris, I'd be glad to make that motion.
Peter's a first. Steve's a second. Any discussion?
I have a question. So Bonnie, is this the person that just retired? I'm sorry, that's stepping back into a teach. That's this position?
Yes, it is.
So the job was posted before this one was vacated. Is that correct?
Linda's letter was actually dated October. We just weren't sure if it had made it to the board yet, so we wanted to be sure to include it in this meeting, in this for you all to see this time. Her letter was dated October.
Okay.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of approving the candidate, Sarah Gates, for Assistant Director of Student Services, signify by raising your hand. Motion carries 9. Wait a minute. So right now I have 8 yeses, and then Devin, are you an abstention?
I'm gonna abstain from this one, Chris.
Yeah.
She's-
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so the motion carries 8-0-1 with Devin abstaining. Okay, let's see, still under new business, we have the MVU co-principal search process.
Okay, that's me again. So we have posted for the MVU co-principal on School Spring, the Messenger, and Burlington Free Press. The deadline for applications is March 4th. We are currently working on forming a committee, getting some MVU staff names with assistance from the union. We have 2 board members interested in joining the committee, as well as Dan and Jen, and some Julie and a representative from central office. Julie has put out a thought exchange of important characteristics in a principal. So we will wait for the application deadline to near, and then work on the candidate selection process for interview.
Okay, any questions regarding the principal search? Seeing none, that concludes new business. We can move on to old business, and first up, under old business, is our financial report.
Okay, so I did add a financial report to the shared drive. Not really too much to talk about, other than I will note on the revenue side, you'll notice that under the federal grant revenue, under title funds, it looks like those have increased. Really, it's just a matter of us after following approved amendments in the grant management system and making those adjustments in our financial management system, so the revenue is actually flowing through. It's a process when we can actually charge things to those lines directly. So it's not a real change, but it does look that way on this financial report. And then on the expense side, you will notice now under the capital construction line that the HVAC project subsidy that was needed above and beyond the bond proceeds of a little over 800,000 is now reflected in that line as well. So that's brought the carryover, the projected surplus, I'm sorry, down to about 2.1 million. But that's really the only areas kind of worth mentioning as changes from the last version that you've seen.
Okay, any questions for the financial report? Hearing and seeing none, we'll move on to budget marketing update.
Okay, so my wonderful companion in the office here, Lisa Way, and I spent a lot of time on the road today, picking up your Mbsd annual reports and delivering them in the rain. And so I really want to take a minute to thank her for being out in the puddles with me. But we did drop them off to every school, the library in Swanton, all the town clerk's offices. And then we of course have them available in our office as well. Chris, I left a copy for you at Georgette's house. I think there's one for you too, Steve, since I know you both go there. We also, I just want to mention that we have a 4-page article. I just shared it with you multiple times as we were making edits with the messenger over and over and over again. But that is now ready to be published tomorrow, actually. So that nice 4-page supplement is going in the messenger tomorrow. Look for that, please share it. It's also been shared on our website. We created a little 2-pager, a little colorful sheet that shows the budget summary on one side, and then this nice graph that shows that our tax rate is continuously going down prior to CLA, and what it would be for a tax rate impact on a homestead value of 200,000, along with article language where they can attend the annual meeting, and then of course how they can vote as well. So that'll be going home hopefully in one way or another, either electronically or in paper, with all of our schools to our students and staff that live in our community. And then it's been shared on social media and websites as well. We have completed all of the videos. Thank you to Robert and everyone that has helped with that, all the administration. Franklin was posted on the websites on social media about 2 weeks ago. Highgate was last week. Swanton was, I'm sorry, MVU was this week. Swanton will be next Monday. And then shared services, which was so much fun to make, was, I'm sure Chris can attest to that, was will be aired the week before town meeting. Of course, we've also we have our annual meeting coming up. We've been sharing that as much as we can. I do hope that you all can log into the Mvsd Facebook page if you're on Facebook and share all those links. That would be wonderful. But annual meeting coming up on the 23rd at 7 p.m. That's going to be in person at MVU, in the library, as well as virtual via Zoom, and that link can be found on our website as well. We've also been fielding questions from a couple of community members here, but of course we always welcome those. And then Kate from the messenger has also spent a bit of time with me on the phone, and I really appreciate her taking the time to do that. I think we had a really great conversation. I think she gained some understanding of the process and the tax rate calculation, and so I just want to notice that time as well. I think that's it for me.
Hey, Laura, I'd like to take this moment to extend a great thank you to Laura for all the work that she and her staff have put into preparing this budget and helping us prepare this budget. It's an incredible amount of work, and she does it almost flawlessly. It's awesome to watch, and I am going to truly miss working with Laura. Any questions regarding the budget marketing update? Seeing none, we'll move on to other business. First up under other business is the facility committee. Honestly, I don't think there's much to update. We have a meeting scheduled for the 28th, next week from Monday. We haven't met since our last meeting. So there's not a whole lot to update. I'm not sure if Peter or Don have something else to add. Nope.
No, I just noticed that Laura got that meeting in right before you were leaving, so.
I sure did.
I noticed that as well. Yeah. Snuck that one right in under the radar.
Thanks for noticing, Peter. I will just say that we have had a couple of meetings with EEI, Jason, Scott, Stephen, and myself. So things are in the works. And I would also like to mention that the Highgate project is in full stride. Scott has been putting in incredible hours. I actually happened to stop in Highgate today. Eric Lafayette from EEI has been on site a ton and doing a ton of legwork to get that project off the ground. So I just would like to update you on that.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for this facility committee? Seeing none, we'll move on to the board goals committee.
Well, I'll start and then the other members can jump in when they want to. We had a great meeting. Kosha came and presented information to us about the audit and the work that's being done for our multi-tiered support system, MTSS. And we did hear a little bit about the absenteeism and how it affects outcomes. We heard a lot of information about the things that we're doing well and some of the things we're going to work on. Kosha is going to give a report out that will be much more thorough than, I think it's going to be like 10 minutes at our next board meeting when we can get her on the agenda to let everybody know about it, because I think it's really important for us all to know how we're trying to do the continuous improvement. The group is going to meet in March and we're going to discuss some more policies, and some of the policies that might be a little more controversial. We're going to get to those too. So anyone else in the committee want to say anything? I'm looking forward to you all hearing Kosha's report. I think it's very interesting. Thanks.
Thank you. Any questions for board goals?
I'm on that committee and I missed the last meeting because of a technical issue on my own fault. But I guess this is something for us all to think about, I think, with the new board coming, if this committee is going to stay on, right? I mean, it's a new board. We would probably need to discuss whether the new board wants the same committees or different committees or whatever. So I just wanted to plant that with everyone because I think the committees have to be stood up at every new board. I'm not sure on that. Don might be able to clarify it. Maybe Chris, I don't know, but I think every board.
Yeah, you're correct, Toby.
So that's something for us all to think about. If we think that this is a good committee to have, we should continue. I think all the committees have done great. So I'm just throwing that out there for us all to think about.
Any other questions or comments regarding board goals? Seeing none, the last committee update is negotiation. And as we did earlier in the meeting, we voted to accept the bargaining agreement. So that concludes that committee. So future agenda items, we have down early college, proficiency information, post-secondary outcome information, curriculum and assessment. Is there anything else somebody would like added? Now, obviously, our next meeting, I've already said that there would be a mass discussion. So that'll be a future agenda item.
Chris, it may have been in what you just said, but at one point we had asked that we're going to get an update from the person who's doing the personal learning plans. The person we hired this year, I think it was a new position this year that we're in.
I believe that is the post-secondary outcome information.
Okay.
Within that, also within the curriculum and assessment. Okay, moving on. Our next meeting is the information meeting, which will be held February 23rd at 7. It's going to be a hybrid. There will be a public space at the MVU library. So if people want to attend in person, they can. It'll also have a virtual link, so anybody that feels more comfortable attending virtually, or if it's just more convenient, that's fine. And then after that, we have a March 8th board meeting scheduled for 6:30. And at this time, I would entertain, do people want to have it virtual or in person? What is the board's pleasure on that?
I'd like to have the information meeting in person if folks are comfortable with that.
Yeah, the information meeting is in person. I'm talking
No,
about
sorry.
the March 8th.
formation. Yeah, the formation meeting of the new board, March 8th.
Yeah. So there's
I can
four.
just-
Go ahead,
Can I
Terry.
just add something, Chris? And that is, I'm sorry, I won't be able to be in person at the first March meeting, but after that, I will be at the meetings in person.
I think the meetings will be kept at the hybrid, even if they are in person. They'll have a public space, not to mention you can still log in virtually because there is still people not comfortable meeting in person. So I think we should continue doing this mixed, at the very least, keep doing this mixed meeting. Laura.
I just want to make sure that before the end of the meeting, if I could just get a potential show of hands of who might be at the annual meeting, that will help us with setup to make sure that it looks conducive to having public potentially there as well as the board. It doesn't have to be, set in stone, but who thinks they might be attending in person?
For the info meeting?
Yes.
I will be there in person. As will Peter, Steve, Toby, Don, Joanne, Devin.
Thank you.
6. I think I got 6 or 7.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I will do my best.
So unless some, what was that, Jen?
I said, I'm sorry I won't be able to go because looking at the weather, I think we're gonna be start boiling next week.
Okay. So the opinion from the board I got for the March 8th meeting was to have it in person with the virtual hybrid. Does everyone agree with that? Straw poll, just raise your hand. Don't really need a formal motion, but okay. So the March 8th meeting at 6:30 will be in person. Usually the first meeting of the month we do at MVU. So we'll just make sure we can get the MVU library, and as long as we can, that's where it'll be. So at this time, we don't have a need.
I'm sorry, Chris. What's the date of the other meeting in March? Did that one get rescheduled and changed, or is that the same?
It did. It got moved to March 24th.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
Chris, before we adjourn, you mind if I take the floor from you for a moment?
Go for it.
So it is the last regular meeting with Chris here. Chris has been on the school board in our community, I think, for 7 years. Is that right, Chris? Starting in Highgate and then moving through the Act 46 merger process, doing the transitional board, and then the first chair of our new Missisquoi Valley School District board. And I think all of us on here on the board who have been on any of those boards are really appreciative of the leadership that you've brought to the boards, the calm thoughtfulness and in your approach, and just want to extend a big thank you from us, and I know that what you've done has been appreciated throughout our communities as well. We're all far away, so we can't shake your hand here at the end, but a big thank you. And I believe there is a plaque that is coming your way. I don't know, Laura, I don't know if that's in the office there yet or not.
Not quite yet, but it's on its way.
But just wanted to take the chance here during this regular meeting before we jump into the informational meeting, just to part with that. So thank you.
Thank you, Devin, and thank you, everyone. I've enjoyed working with everyone. I truly have. Those that don't know, the reason, or a lot of the reason I got on boards is because of my father-in-law, Dave Roddy. And though I have not done anywhere near the amount of years he did, I hope I've done him proud. It's one of my goals. Thank you, everyone, and it's been a pleasure working with you. So if there's nothing else at this time, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. Peter is a first, Steve's a second. All those in favor, raise your hand.
This is sad. I don't want to raise my hand. I feel bad, Chris. You've been so great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Motion carries 9-0. We are adjourned at 8:12. Thank you,
Bye,
everyone.
Chris. Thank you.
Have a
Thanks,
good
Chris.
night.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.